Hello everybody, this is Pastor Green. We're doing another Bible study, 1 Corinthians chapter 11. If you'd like me to come speak at your church, or if you have any questions, you can email me at godsohman@gmail.com. We're going to start with 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 1. Be ye followers of me, even as I also am of Christ. Now I praise you, brethren, that ye remember me in all things, and keep the ordinances as I deliver them unto you. But I would have you know that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of every woman is the man, and the head of Christ is God. Every man praying or prophesying, having his head covered, dishonoureth his head. So what he's saying here is that there's like a hierarchy. So it's God first, then Christ, which is basically the same person, then the man, then the woman. And later in the Bible we'll find out that it goes your kids and everybody else. So a man's supposed to look at God first and say, God's your what you get your laws from, basically. The woman respects her husband, who also respects God. And you go through that way. And I'm saying here that every man praying or prophesying, having his head covered, dishonoureth his head. There's this idea that men aren't really supposed to cover their head, basically. Verse 5. For every woman that prayeth or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonoureth her head. That is, she is even all as she was shaven. For if a woman is not covered, let her also be shorn. But if it is a shame for a woman to be shorn or shaven, let her be covered. So basically it's saying that the man's not supposed to cover his head, but the woman is supposed to cover his head. This came to a bunch of different divisions of Christianity where they basically forced a woman to have something on their head at all times. And this guy here, Mino Simmons, is kind of the guy that started the whole women have to have their head covered thing. It says Mino Simmons was a Roman Catholic priest from the Friesland region of the Lower Countries who became an influential Anabaptist religious leader. Simmons was a contemporary of the Protestant reformers, and from his name that followeth become known as the Mennonites. Mennonites are the Amish, basically, as a lot of people know. And the Anabaptists is what the Catholics call the Christians, because Catholics would baptize people when they were babies. Christians would only baptize you after you got saved. So they were called Anabaptists or rebaptizers. That's where the name Anabaptist came from. So if you look at the Mennonite religion or the Amish, women always have their head covered. Men do not. I mean, sometimes they wear the little hats and everything, but not when they're at church. They got to take their hats off at church. Anywhere you go, if you see a Mennonite or an Amish person, women usually have their hair in a nice little bun in the back, and they have a hat covering it. At a certain age, they make the girls wear a hat. I don't know what that age is. And you could go online and you could buy head coverings, and whether it be the whole head covering or just a little like patch of skin or even like a headband or something like that. There's all these different head coverings. And there's actually a book called An Introduction to Christian Head Coverings where it teaches women how to keep their head covered. And you can see over here on the left hand side different styles to cover your head. And basically the idea is that women need to keep their head covered because the Bible says so. And of course there's some little pictures I put in here that I thought was funny. How I think I look, what society thinks of me, the church's impression of me, how my friends see me, how my mother sees me, the way my teenager looks at me, the way the young kids see me, my husband's impression of me, and what the angels see. And these are like quotes from head coverings throughout Christian history. So the Apostle Paul says a woman ought to have a symbol of authority on her head. Clement of Alexandria says women and men are to go to church decently attired. It has become for her to pray veiled. Tertullian says for women God bids you to be veiled. Martin Luther says women should be covered with a veil for the sake of angels. Thomas Aquinas says a woman should wear a covering to show that besides God she's naturally subjected to another. Augustine says it's not fitting even for a married woman to uncover her hair. John Bunyan says, methinks holy and beloved sisters, you should consent to wearing the power badge. Charles Spurgeon, the reason why our sisters appear in the house of God with their heads covered is because of the angels. R.C. Sproul says, I think that head covering symbols should remain intact as a sign of our obedience to God. They're all pretty much saying that women cover their hair as obedience to God, and that's the idea behind it. Back to 1 Corinthians 11, verse 7. For a man indeed ought not to cover his head, for as much as he is the image and glory of God. But the woman is the glory of the man. For the man is not the woman, but the woman is of the man. And basically, this is basically saying that having your hair down, uncovered, is kind of sexual or kind of attractive. And since the woman's job is to basically serve the man or to only please him in that type of manner, she's to keep her head covered. That way she doesn't arouse other men. Neither was the man created for the woman, but the woman for the man. For this cause ought the woman to have the power on her head because of the angels. So he's saying that man was created first, then women were created to be their helpers. Because of that, women are supposed to look a certain way, not to appease other men. And then it says you're supposed to have a power on your head because of the angels, because the angels are looking down on you. Nevertheless, neither is the man without the woman, neither the woman without the man in the Lord. For as the woman of the man, even so the man also by the woman, but all things of God. So he's saying that even though this is true that woman was created for man, woman is supposed to help men, we're all equal in the law. We're all the same. But because men have these certain ideas of lust and sexual thoughts, if you cover your head, you're gonna not get another man to look at you in a certain way. So it's just a thing you do. Judge in yourselves, it is comely that a woman pray unto God uncovered. Does not even nature itself teach you that if a man has a long hair, it's a shame unto him? So in 1 Corinthians 11, verse 14, it's saying that a man should not have long hair. He should keep his hair short, and we'll see later that a woman is supposed to have long hair. It's in 1 Corinthians that men should have long hair. But if you look at pictures of Jesus, a lot of the pictures of Jesus, he's got long hair, which it would be a shame for a man to have long hair. Obviously, he would have short hair because that's what the Bible says he should have. But all throughout these different pictures, people have made pictures of Jesus with long hair. I don't really know why, but that's what they've done. 1 Corinthians 11, verse 15. But if a woman have long hair, it is a glory to her, for her hair is given for her for a covering. But if any man seems to be contentious, we have not so custom, neither the church of God. What it's saying is women should have long hair, and your hair is the covering you need on your head. So you don't need to cover your head because your hair already does that. Now I'm assuming that maybe if you have short hair, you have to have a covering. But if you have long hair, that long hair in and of itself is the covering that the Bible says you should have. So, there's some girls with long hair here. Some more girls with long hair. Here's a girl with short hair. Now I would assume if you would have hair like this, because you don't have your neck and your ears and everything covered, you should have covering. There's another girl with short hair. So I'm guessing since the hair is short, it doesn't cover your neck and your collarbone area. That's kind of attractive to men, so maybe they should have the covering over them so that way it hides those areas. But if a woman has long hair, it is a glory unto her, and her hair is given her for a covering. So the Bible is very clear. Women should cover their hair, but you should have long hair because that is your covering. So you don't need a hat or a scarf. Your hair is your covering. Now it is that I declare unto you that praise you not, that you come together not for the better, but for the worst. For first of all, when you come together in the church, I hear there are divisions among you, and I partly believe it. He's saying when you come together as a family for Christ. You know, we're not gonna do it because it's gonna be a bad thing. We're gonna do it because it's gonna be a good thing. For there must also be errors among you, that when they are approved may be made manifest among you. And when you come together, therefore, in one place, this is not to eat the Lord's Supper. Your job is not to come together to have a meal. They're there to have a fellowship. And you can see here the picture of the Lord's Supper. All the disciples, for whatever reason, have halos on their heads. Another picture of the Lord's Supper, and only Jesus has a little thing around his head. But the idea is not to come together to have the Lord's Supper. You're not supposed to have a big meal. You're supposed to maybe remember what Jesus did. And so you have communion, you have some grape juice, you have some wafers, little unleavened bread. For eating, everyone taketh before other his own supper, and one is hungry, and another is drunken. What? Have you not houses to eat or to drink in, or despise the church of God, and ashamed of them that have not? What shall I say to you? Shall I praise you in this? I praise you not. He's saying, you don't get drunk at the church, don't overeat at the church. The idea is to come together for the better, to talk about what Christ has done for you, not to talk about all the things that you've done and everything that's great about you. You got your own house to eat and drink in. For I have received you to the Lord, that which also delivered unto you, that the Lord Jesus, the same night in which he was betrayed, took bread. And when he had given thanks, he broke it. He said, Take this, eat it as my body, which is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me. He's saying when you come together for communion, you think about what Christ did. He took the bread, he broke it. He says, Eat the bread, think about me. And in the same manner he took the cup, and when he had supped, saying, This cup is the New Testament of my blood. Do this ye as oft as you drink it, in remembrance of me. And as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you do show the Lord death until he comes. So it's a remembrance of what Christ did, the last meal that he had before he was crucified. And every year, or every now and then, you should do the communion in remembrance of Christ, and you keep doing it until he comes. So there's also this big old thing about should you use wine or should you use grape juice. Now the word wine in the Greek means anything from the grape all the way up until fermented. The Bible seems pretty clear that you shouldn't have alcohol, so in my thing, you should have grape juice. So again, there's all these different things about should you have wine, should you have grape juice. Proverbs 29:29 says, Who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has contentions? Who has babbling? Who has wounds without cause? Who has redness of eyes? They that tarry long at the wine, they that go to seek mixed wine. It's basically saying that when you drink, sometimes you do dumb things. Sometimes you have bruises on your face that when you wake up in the morning, you don't know how they got there. You babble, you don't really talk right. The Bible's pretty clear that you probably shouldn't have alcohol, so grape juice is fine. But I've heard of a guy that actually had, I think he said he had Pepsi and Reese cups or something like that. But the idea was to say this is going to be done specifically to remember God, remember what he did. And if you don't have the special stuff, you go buy some Welch's grape juice or any kind of grape juice. You go buy some saltine crackers at the store. You could do it that way. I wouldn't recommend doing it with a loaf of bread, but if that's all you got, then that's what you use, because it's supposed to be unleavened. But crackers, oyster crackers, you just pick something that's an idea of this is what God's doing for us. This is what God did before he got crucified. Look not upon the wine when it is red, when it giveth its color in the cup, when it moveth itself about. It is at last biteth like a serpent, and stingeth like an adder. When it says when it moveth around, it means it's fermented. It's saying that you should avoid these things. Thine eyes shall behold strange women, and thine heart shall utter perverse things. Yea, thou shalt be that he lieth down in the midst of the sea, and he that lieth upon the tips of the mast. Some people, when they drink, they get very promiscuous, and they get very flirty, they get very sexual in nature. And he's saying, avoid these things. They should have stricken me, thou shalt say, and I was not sick. They have beaten me and fell onto it. When I should awake, when I should see it again. The Bible's pretty clear. You shouldn't have alcohol because sometimes you get in fights. You get sick afterwards. When shall I awake? You get real tired. It's not really a good thing according to the Bible. Back to 1 Corinthians 11, verse 27. Wherefore, whatsoever shall eat this bread and drink of this cup of the Lord unworthily shall be guilty of the body and the blood of the Lord. But let a man examine himself, and so let him eat of that bread and drink of that cup. He's saying that if you are not saved, you shouldn't take the communion, because you're not doing it for Christ, you're doing it for yourself, because if you did it for Christ, you'd be saved. And when you do this communion, examine yourself. Where can I improve? What can I do different? How can I serve God better? Do things like that. For he that eateth and drinketh unworthily, eateth and drinketh damnation to himself, not discerning the Lord's body. But this cause many are weak and sickly among you, and many sleep. He's saying that if you're wanting to take the Lord's Supper, you should be saved first. If you're doing it, you're not doing it for Christ, you're doing it for yourself. And it's a damnation unto yourself. And it's not discerning to the Lord's body. For if we would judge ourselves, we should not be judged. But when we are judged, we are chastened of the Lord, that we should not be condemned with the world. When you examine yourself, you're examining yourself to how can you be a better Christian? How can you treat others better? How can you show Christ more and mentor more? But see, when you don't do it properly, you're attacking God. Wherefore, my brethren, when you come together to eat, tarry for one another. And if any man hunger, let him eat at home, that he that come together not to condemnation, and the rest will set in order when they come. So you're not going to the Lord's Supper to have a big meal. You're having a little cracker, a little juice. The idea is to remember what Christ did, to remember what Christ is doing. It's not to have some big meal. Well, guys, that's the video. I appreciate you guys watching. If you guys have any questions, you can comment below, or you can send me an email. I'm going to put the 1 Corinthians Bible Study series on the bottom right of the screen. I believe Luke's going to be on the top left of the screen, and then there's going to be a video on the bottom left that YouTube things you might like. I appreciate you guys watching. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. Like the video. And if you think somebody might be interested in this, please share it with them. Have yourself a great day. I'll see you in the next video.